it's time for some messages. I don't know.
Hello, you're listening to The Psychic Guys. My name is David, and I'm joined by my truly marvelous co-hosts, Josh, Daz, and Brett. Our somewhat spooky topic tonight is things which go bump in the night. We'll be discussing the different ways the dead might remain in the world of the living, and we'll also be sharing some of our own experiences. So, without further ado, guys, I want to kick it off with a question. Which one of you is the most haunted? And I'm going to turn this off as well. This is hurting my eyes.
Yeah, you've got a light there that's gonna blind you.
No, it's the good UV, not the bad UV.
Got it. I don't know who's the most haunted. I don't know. Are you pretty? I guess I feel like that's a question
I'm not,
after.
I've never been really haunted.
After we talk about some of our
What's your
stuff.
metric for most haunted?
Well, have you seen a ghost? Have you felt a hand creeping up your leg in the night, and then when you turned on the light, there was nobody there?
This is almost like one of those put a finger down challenges. I haven't physically, other than those shadow people, I wouldn't really classify those as ghosts.
I have a bit of an app on you guys though, because I was a trained medium, so
True.
Oh yeah.
Did it follow you?
Go on,
is
then.
the question. Yeah, hit us with your best shot, Daz. Your medium experiences.
Well, yeah. Let me go first then. For me, ghost and bump in the night stuff started from the age of 5. I've been living in this current house I'm at now since I was 7 years old. It was my parents' house and I took it over. So I've been here, what's that, 47 years or plus. But previously, before we came here, we moved here when I was, as I said, around about 7. But previously, I was literally 2 minutes away, in a street just down the road. And we moved from there because of poltergeist haunting activity. It got too much. So we'd be downstairs as a family, and we'd hear thumping of noises going up the stairs regularly and someone running around in the rooms up above us. But of course, there never was anyone there. And I think all that predates. I don't know the exact history of all this, but I think that slightly predates, and it may have made my mother get involved in the spiritualist church, which then, took me on my journey to being trained in all kinds of psychic stuff, including mediumship and later on remote viewing. So that's my ghosty origin story. Yeah, so it started young for me at the age of, I would say, I experienced poltergeist activity at the age of 5.
Wow, that's definitely early. What about you, David?
All right, Daz wins. Well, I had a kind of a sense of a presence after a family member died when I was a kid, and then I mentioned this last week. I kind of said, "Can you go away? You're freaking me out," and it just went, and I never had anything since. So I'm always jealous of people who have these really wild experiences where things are flying off the shelves or the aliens come down and talk to them, because none of that shit ever happens to me, and I wish it would. It sounds fun, right? But I'm devoid of really amazing ghost stories. I got a few psychic interactions and kind of remote viewing and clearing kind of interactions with the dead, which I think will be interesting to talk about a bit later on. But I'm short on the classical poltergeists and ghosty ghouly stuff, unfortunately. What about you, Josh?
Well, I'd say my first experience
the ghosts of he's gonna have to.
What? Okay, my first experience.
We're gonna have to do a
probably
seance so we can find out what Josh is saying.
Can you
Is
hear me
anybody
now?
there?
Is there a spirit in the room with us?
I'll start rapping. Is that?
Yep.
All right.
You have to tell your story as a rap.
Okay,
Now,
ready?
I'll lay down a beat.
Now, anyways, about a year or so after I had lost my grandparents, both of them passed in about 2007. I had a couple one-off experiences where I'd be sitting in church and it would be during some sort of a very emotional worship song, and I would start to hear them call my name, not orally, like it wasn't hearing with my ears, it was just like thinking of the sound of their voice unprompted. Like I wasn't just, let me think of them. just started hear them call my name.
We're gonna have to get the Ouija board out.
We're gonna have to get the Ouija board for sure.
Josh, let us know when you're back.
I'm having like crystal clear connection with you guys. It's odd, to be honest. I'm good on my end.
Yeah, you're back now.
You're back.
You dropped out after they weren't calling your name orally, and then
You can edit it out.
mystery again.
Yeah, I
I
could
can,
just
but I'm not going to.
yeah, don't just make it an awkward part of the thing. They would just call my name essentially, and it was weird. That's the moral of that story. Other than that, I've had
Interesting.
odd experiences where my wife would hear about again, really?
Yeah, I mean we're getting most of it, but
What these are the stories that the
His
CIA doesn't want
technology
you to
is
hear about.
haunted. I think
This
that's
is
yeah,
that's
he's
what
the ghost
happened.
in the
The ghost of
machine.
the machine. He's got
that
5
happens quite
bars.
often for me.
It's a sign.
It
Yeah.
is.
It is.
This is like when TVs were old-fashioned, and you had to put one hand on where the aerial plugged in, and then hold a coat hanger up in the air with the other one, and then lean around like that to actually watch what was on the screen.
I
That's more or
actually
less what
remember
I'm
having
doing
Maybe you
sitting
should
in the
try
car
that.
right now. I'm not even
Yeah.
gonna lie. The only physical sensation I've ever had with a spirit is something I won't say it literally was my wife's grandfather because I don't know, but there was odd manifestations of the smell of a cigar, that kind of cigar he would smoke. And that was something I could physically smell as opposed to just that psychic sensation. You know, the subtler kind of difference. Nobody in our house smokes. There's no cigars anywhere around the house, but it showed up, and that's honestly the closest I have to a weird experience of that nature.
I've had phantom smells as well, including tobacco smoke. But then tobacco smoke is such a strong smell if you're not a smoker. I always kind of think, was somebody walking past outside and the smell like blew up through the floorboards or something? I mean, I don't think so, because where I am, that's pretty unlikely. But yeah, phantom smells is an interesting one. That's actually quite a common experience for people who wouldn't generally call themselves experiencers, right? Is, oh, there's a certain point in my house, and at random times I'll smell this perfume, and
Yep.
the rest of the time it's gone, and I can't tell where it's coming from or whatever. And you think maybe there's just a lady upstairs who sprays a lot of perfume at a particular time of day, and it comes down through. But I think sometimes that's a legit thing. We've
Definitely,
probably all
yeah.
experienced it in remote viewing sessions where you can really smell something, and you're like, "Is my house on fire? What's going on?" Josh, could you turn your car around or switch to Wi-Fi or something, because we can hear you most of the time, but it is a bit choppy.
I'm currently not saying
Or
anything.
move your
Was
phone.
that the?
No, I wasn't expecting you to say something. I was just, while Brett tells his ghost story, you could try putting the phone in a different place or doing
Oh,
some
yeah,
different
sure.
thing with it,
I
so
have
that you
been
come through
moving
a bit
up and
clearer.
down in the
I mean, you're
driveway.
sounding okay, but you're just dropping out. Yeah,
He's doing a ghost
use
dance.
dowsing to find
Finding
the
my
optimal
sweet
Ghost
spot.
dance.
Okay, is that a thing? Is that like a rain dance? No, not that spot. You need a different spot.
I have in the past shredded sigils to techno deities and watched my bar jump up by 1 or 2. So maybe, who knows?
Wherever you are now, don't move. That's working.
All right. I think it's
And
also
what about,
just
Cool.
it's
Don't move
jumping.
at all.
Oh, sorry. Carry on.
I was going to say, what about Brett's?
No,
Has he got any initial ghost stories?
Yeah. I would say that I've had a fairly haunted life. There was a period where it all turned off. It didn't start as young as you, Daz. For me, when it started was probably around, was a little bit older, like 8 or 9 is when very strange things happened in my childhood. I had a lot of experiences where I saw shadow figures in the middle of the night, strange things where would move in my room, and I'd wake up in the morning and be like, "Why is this here? This isn't." And a reoccurring thing. And this is something probably for a different story, because I'm not so sure it's ghost, or like, is it really, what is a ghost, right? And so what the definition is, kind of, this could be a lot of different things,
Yeah.
but something would be like, I would close, uh, this is as a kid, my closet door, and I'd have this, illogical fear of the closet. And because I'd wake up in the morning and the closet door would actually be open by about a foot, and no one had come into my room that I was aware of, and it would happen a little bit more often than I feel it should. So I'd wake up and I'd look at it and I'd stare blankly at it like, what? What is this? And so, and that kind of went on with a couple other childhood experiences that were pretty strange. Seeing kind of shadow figures, which that very well could have been in a like a false awakening state, but there were several times where I was very, very awake. I knew I was awake. There was no reawakening, and I saw things in the space. So I never really, at that point in my life, knew what any of that was. But interestingly, when I hit puberty, it all stopped, like, completely. And from about 13 to my mid 20s, when I started learning remote viewing, there was nothing. It was just a total, like, silence zone, which is also where, I had no intuition during that period. I was not psychic at all. And it was only when I started learning to remote view that all of this stuff kind of started getting rattled again. And I have several stories I could talk tonight about some of the more recent things that have happened. With What's interesting about these ones is they weren't just my experience. These happened over the past 2 to 3 years. They're probably the more significant ones, with myself and my fiance, Victoria. And so I kind of, there's her perspective and her experience of it, and then my perspective and my experience of it. And so I had her kind of give me a refresher last night on what, do you remember these three things there? I don't know if I'll tell all three, but, I have a few that were pretty interesting, that, uh, poltergeist like type activity, haunting type like activity, things that affect you in your dreams, but then they kind of bleed over into your waking moments as well. And then obviously now I have the skill sets to be able to actually look at these things. And I've actually spent quite some time learning the skills on how to actually clear anything that's harassing me in that space out as well, which I didn't know how to do early on. So when I was doing remote viewing early on, I just kind of was more of a victim to it than someone who could actually handle it. Um, but yeah, so I'd say there was a bit of it early on, of seeing things in my room. A lot of strange things happened, like between the ages of like 9 to 12, and then stopped. And then it started up again when I started learning remote viewing in my mid 20s. And it's on and off. Um, I find mostly now, I've learned enough on how to shield my space from that kind of stuff myself, that unless I'm like actively treading into uncharted territories, which is actually one of my stories that caused something to kind of, it was the that effect. What's the name of it, Daz? It's where it's like this happens at Skinwalker Ranch, where people go there and something follows them home.
The hitchhiker effect.
Hitchhiker, that's the word. Yeah, I've had that kind of a thing occur from a remote viewing session, which is perhaps a story I'll tell tonight.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if is it
Wow. Are
haunting?
you thinking about the Grand
That's
Canyon?
exactly the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we all had that.
Yep.
That knocked me out for
Yep.
weeks. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's my
Well, I
experience.
think there's a good point there, right? That it's not clear whether these things are to do with the human dead or whether there are other weird shit going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes the other weird shit will pretend to be the human dead.
Totally.
And I think sometimes things are just odd, and we either project onto them or assume that this must be a ghost because it was kind of human shaped and it showed up and it scared me. So it must be dead people, right? But actually, I think there's a lot more stuff that can cause phenomena like that, and I think we should go into that stuff too, right? Because I don't think we can look at a single case of haunting and say that was definitely the soul or spirit or whatever it is of a dead person doing that thing. It actually is super tricky to peel those apart,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. In my experience, I think it's because, as you guys know, I come from a psychic family. Um, so I think the experiences we had back then that made us move house. Um, I don't know. I never really spoke about it with my mother, and she's passed now. Um, but looking back on it and knowing that my brother and sister are also psychic, but they don't really develop their skills. For me, I think it might have been the the precursor. It might just been something that had to happen. I think for my mother to take her path, for then me to take my path. But I think the early days of us having this weird poltergeist type activity um, really stemmed around us kids. I don't know how I can quantify that, other than I do remember getting quite upset many times for being blamed for turning on lights and bits and pieces that me and the other kids never did. Um, but it's interesting that most of us start down this path of seeing this kind of interaction at a very young age. Like at least 50% of us here. I mean, Josh, when did your voices stuff start? Were you older or younger?
I was around the age of 12 or 13.
Yeah, a lot of stuff tends, which is what interests me about what Brett was saying, because I've read up on this quite a lot, and a lot of the main experiences, especially when it's physical activity involved, like poltergeist or things moving and stuff, usually happens right when the children reach puberty. So it was interesting to hear that Brett's kind of stopped when he reached puberty. I would have expected it to have ramped up a stage.
Well, when
Yeah.
I became a parent, somebody said to me, I got two daughters, and someone said to me, "Well, the thing is, if you've got sons, they're a nightmare before puberty, and then they're much more chill when they're teenagers. And when you've got daughters, it's the other way around, and they're good as gold until they hit puberty, and then it's just nothing but drama." And
I've heard the
obviously,
same.
that's a bit of a generalization, but from my what I've heard about and read about the poltergeist phenomenon, it's more common than not that there's a teenage girl who's really stressed out or having
I've heard
emotional
that
issues
too.
or has epilepsy or something. So
My
maybe that folklore holds true for poltergeists as well. That boys are haunted before puberty and girls are haunted during it.
actually my wife had an experience like that with the loss of I forget whether it was the maternal or paternal grandfather, but she reported experiences like laundry doors opening and closing when she was the only one in the house. Like she could confirm she was the only one in the house, and
Yeah.
she claims to have heard her grandfather's voice at one point, things of that nature.
Well, something you were talking about our parents or our grandparents. One of the stories that my mom told me when I was a kid. I grew up in a Christian Baptist home, so anything that was not praise Jesus was, strictly forbidden. Type of it was very strict, and don't you dare do anything like that. Like the idea of having psychical functioning, it would be heretical, and that would be very bad. It'd be the demons and the devils are possessing you. And so my experience, I actually never told my parents as I was a kid, because my mom actually, when she was younger, um, we didn't actually start religious, but when my mom was younger, she actually did a lot of religion hopping to see what she was kind of in alignment with. And she was actually, interestingly, in the Church of Satan for a period of time when she was living in San Francisco. And she told me a story when I was young as a warning against, she became very, very Christian after some of her experiences in that, where she had experiences of haunting. And obviously these were mine, but I don't see why she would lie to me about her own experience. But
Yeah.
one of them was around a Ouija board. And she said, "Brett, don't ever use a Ouija board. Let me tell you my experience of doing it." And what she told me, the short story is she used it with her sister, and it was working. And what happened is that it was in her parents' home before she had moved out, and she said that on the ceiling above where they were using the Ouija board, there was black soot that began to land, like it was showing up on the ceiling. That her parents were out of town when they did this for a few days. Her dad, my grandpa, had traveled a lot for work, and sometimes would take her mom with him, and they had to actually paint over the black soot because they scrubbed it with uh, soap. They tried to get it off any way they could, but they had to actually get new paint and paint over the soot because after the use of the Ouija board, they had this type of experience. Now, I'm not saying every time you use a Ouija board this is going to happen, but I'd probably not. But this was her very dead serious warning to me as a kid, like, don't fool around with this type of stuff. This is real, and you need to be careful. And so, obviously, but I think that there's maybe something to this idea of also, if your parents experience something, could it actually get passed on down to your children? And I don't know if it's genetic or something's following. Like, there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of just even fiction around this of it being
Do you know,
passed
I
down.
got a couple of personal stories about that
Yeah.
with my kids, because one of my kids is super sensitive to this stuff. And a couple of times, and this isn't ghosts, this is like entities, this is the flora and fauna of not quite physical, the stuff, the floaters, right? And you run across this stuff, it's not a big deal. And a couple of times I've had stuff show up and I've not dealt with it properly because I've been busy, I've been working on something else. So instead of dismantling it, as would be the proper way to do it, I'm just like, now get out of here. And then twice now, I've had my kid start screaming, waking up in bed, having bad dreams, and she tells me what she's seen, and it's exactly what I've seen a few minutes earlier, and been like, get out of my house. And instead of getting out of the house, it's just gone upstairs and been like, so you can see me. I'm going to go mess with her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, stop that. That's not cool. So definitely in the short term, it can happen. And it's always a reminder to me to be more careful.
Sure.
When you said your mum was in the Church of Satan, Brett, was that the Levian one or the atheisty one or that
I
other
think
one?
that,
I
I guess, what time
Because
was it?
I mean, this was before I was born, so this would have been in the 70s at some point, I imagine. I'm unsure of the details. She didn't really like talking a lot about that period of her
fair enough.
life.
Fair enough.
That
You
was
wouldn't, would you?
the main memory
Not
I
with the
had as
kids.
a kid. I mean, and I remember that story as clear as it happening yesterday. It was because she was just so serious about it, and it was so strange. I was like, okay, I won't
It
ever
was
do. I won't do
probably,
it. I won't touch that stuff. So
yeah, if it was around the 70s, it was probably the Levian church. I'm pretty sure he came before that
yeah, it's hard.
particular atheist movement, especially if it was in
Yeah, it's hard to
California.
know.
Yeah.
That's where he was based.
I have wondered if the things that I experienced as a kid were as a result of things being around my mom, and it wouldn't surprise me if it was something to that effect because she engaged with a lot of this type of stuff and then basically closed it all off when she had kids totally, and then went very deep down the very religious rabbit hole, as imagine, for many reasons, but one of them is probably as like a way to shield herself from the stuff that she experienced, because I think she had a lot of experiences too. She just never talked about them. So
Yeah, and you don't want that stuff in the house with the kids, do you? You know,
yeah,
that's not what you want to be happening. I suppose engaging with things like various satanic churches or Ouija boards, or I'm not calling out your mum here. Just
fine.
general things that people do to open themselves up to stuff. A lot more people do that than are able to perceive clearly what's happening or to deal with it effectively.
Yeah.
And I think when it goes really south is when people get scared of it and react to it strongly, and there's this kind of positive feedback loop, and people get sucked into it, and can end up with phenomena that you'd call a poltergeist phenomena. You can end up with stuff moving around and physical effects happening, and it's not a spirit of a dead person; it's some kind of psychic phenomenon, not otherwise specified. You know that call me a bit of a curmudgeon. I'm a very skeptical about the survival of the human ego after death, right? Because ego is a worldly thing that's associated with the body and where you grew up, and ego wants to do things like not die and eat food, and you really don't need to do either of those when you're dead, right? So it doesn't make a huge deal of sense to, like, okay, I'm going to drop dead, and then my spirit is going to be wearing these clothes, but is going to be looking even more dashing and handsome, and is going to be floating around, appearing in people's dreams forever. Like, why should this physical construct just like carbon copy over to some other realm? And then, so even if people are genuinely communicating with aspects of their dead loved ones, I think there's a great deal of projection or reference to what's in the mind of the person experiencing it at the time.
So I'm gonna push back a little bit on you on that one.
Yeah,
Two
do.
two different reasons. The first one is there's a lot of experiences of people who have near death experiences, and it's not obviously foolproof, but it is an example of they left their body. They were still their personality self, but they were without a body, and they saw themselves on the floor. This often happens sometimes on operating tables, things like that, where they're no longer attached to their body, and so their body isn't the thing that made them their personality conscious self. And so it's not like a part of them was gone, it was still them, and which is also why it leads to a lot of confusion. There's a lot of stories of also
Well,
that
I
happening.
love the NDE literature is great. It's fascinating, isn't it? And it has a lot of puzzles in it as well. Has a
Yeah,
lot of interesting, well,
I had one.
clues, suggestions.
I had
I
an
think
NDE.
you had
Wasn't
one.
it
Yeah.
wasn't it Robert Bigelow who was holding that competition of give us an experiment to prove the survival of human
Right, I
consciousness
saw that.
after
Mm.
the body? I believe Des, didn't you
Well,
participate in that competition?
I did put in a proposal bid for it, yes, but none of the people that put in, as far as I'm aware, none of the remote viewing projects that submitted proposals were selected.
well, I think they moved the goalposts
They
a little
did,
bit,
yes.
didn't they? And he started adding more and more things that he wanted, and it started saying some stuff. Was that publicly that they'd put the additional requirements?
I don't. I actually don't know on that one. It was public between all the people who obviously submitted bids that they added an addendum target to it. But yeah, I don't know if it was actually public.
Well, anyway, I won't say what it is then in case
Yeah,
it
just in
wasn't.
case.
But
Yeah,
what the additional requirements that they'd put on people who'd already spent ages coming up with bids for
yeah,
this proof survival thing made a lot of assumptions about the mechanics of death and
yeah.
survival and the spirit of people and stuff, which you'd think actually you should prove those first before you
Mhm.
demand that people
Yes.
prove these, because they were big assumptions. So the NDE stuff, there's also quite a few cases that I've read where people have that floating above the operating table or the car crash or whatever it is experience, and then they zoom off into somewhere else and have whatever NDE experience they're going to have. But later on in the experience, they often report, I still felt like me, but all of the stuff of my human life was extremely distant, and I'd kind of it seemed far
Sure.
away and forgotten and not me anymore. And so they still had the sense of being themselves, but they were kind of completely detached
Mm.
from the human egoic side of that. So that when people have experiences of, I saw my uncle Frank and he was wearing his smoking jacket and he was in heaven and he was growing cabbages just like he always did, and it's like, why do you have to grow cabbages in heaven? Sorry, like, can we, what the hell, that you
I
do,
mean, what is
there's
heaven
no
without
need for
cabbages, man?
agriculture in heaven, right? Surely.
But that
Is
might
there?
have just been a signature that maybe the life form was using to make
Yeah, yeah.
himself recognizable.
That's what I mean, though.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, when people have these experiences of the dead and they see Uncle Frank in his smoking jacket growing cabbages like he used
Yeah.
to, that's not because Uncle Frank is existing in heaven and wearing a smoking jacket and growing
Yes.
cabbages,
True.
right?
Yeah.
What I was saying about the sense of self that people having a near death experience have, that's separate from a lot of the ego junk that they kind of feel very distant from, or completely forget, depending on the experience, right? That sense of self could be there,
Yeah.
and you'd know that as another person psychically, wouldn't you? You would be like, I know who this
Is
is.
it separate though?
And that's really common. People saying, I just knew it was my grandmother. I just knew. right? So you still have that just no, and I think maybe if you have that just no, part of the process can conjure up the smoking jacket and the cabbages and whatever other props, right? But then people can confuse their experience with
I don't think
the
they're
underlying
exclusive.
reality, right? Because
I
it's
think
such a vivid experience.
I think they both could be true. I think what you're describing could be true, but I don't think if that exists, it excludes the other from also being possible.
Are you saying that there are cabbages in heaven?
No,
It
Let's
but
depends
remote
on your
view it right
definition of
now.
heaven.
I think that we do probably create a vision of ourselves, an avatar of ourselves in this
Yeah,
alternate space, just like we do here on Earth as
totally.
well.
Mm.
Totally.
And that alternate vision of you, that that virtual reality kind of avatar, might be might have cabbages at your feet.
Yep.
I suppose, yeah. Also, I guess a lot of people who die are not into all of this weird stuff that we do and wouldn't necessarily be completely accepting or aware of the fact that they're dead. And we certainly get that with the
Yeah,
residues that are left behind on Earth in a
because
kind of
like
unhealthy way, which I think we should talk about that as well, right? The when people have traumatic deaths and you get bad vibes or hauntings or little whispering voices hanging around a location.
yeah. But continuing on
Probably
this virtual
all
thing a
dealt with that.
second.
Sorry, Jazz, go
No,
ahead.
I was just thinking because this generates thoughts as we're going along, and
Yeah.
oh, I lost my train of thought on this now. Um, but I was thinking back to because we were talking about egos and what we look like and what people look like when we're dead and stuff. But I was just trying to think back to all the times I kind of glimpsed myself or looked at myself or thought about my presence within a meditation. It's not as an overweight, balding guy dressed in dressed in a hoodie. It's always someone 20 years younger, 4 stone slimmer. Do you know what I mean? I had this virtual kind of identity of myself
Sure.
in alternative space, which isn't what my human form is right here, right now.
Yeah. I do the same thing. Like in my ERV cooldown, when I'm about to jump off the cliff, just before I after I do that energy conversion box and before I dive off the cliff to kind of begin that transition into woo woo space, I check my own appearance and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna wear some nice white linen and look all spiritual and cool, maybe add a little bit of a glow, so that if anybody sees me, they'll be like,
Yeah,
I'm not messing with that guy.
absolutely. So what we may be experiencing may just be a continuation of that. It may just be our altered non-human life egoistic avatar
Yeah.
appearance.
To
Yeah.
I think we can bring this down to earth a tiny little bit because there's a phenomenon in dreams where people really often dream about themselves. Whatever's happening in the dream, the image of themselves in the dream is from their early 20s or late teens.
Hmm.
And it's like that's teens and early 20s is when ego is developing properly and like your adult sense of self is cementing. And then it kind of ossifies to some extent and solidifies and the plasticity kind of drops and you're like, okay, now I'm me, and that image from that point in your life seems to get stuck at some layer of the subconscious, so that when you're dreaming about that, you're not dreaming about old me with back pain. Have you ever been in a dream and been like, oh, my back's sore, I would get chased by these lizards, but oh god damn, some painkillers, asleep, I need a
I
nap.
thought it was just me and
You're
the
always just,
lizards.
those thoughts don't go through your head.
I
What?
thought it was just me being chased by lizards. You guys get chased by them as well?
Komodo dragons. I have a so there's the out of body or the near death experience angle, and one that I actually had when I was a young kid, like really young. I was 4 years old and I almost drowned in the ocean and was floating around my body before I had CPR and was was basically resuscitated. So that, but there's another angle too, which is from more of a my psychic work, the remote viewing work that I've done angle, and which gives me a slightly different perspective as well. This was a project that a client gave me, and they were aware on how to do project setup. They were someone who I'd worked with for a while, so it's very few people that I just trust to set up a task for me. But this person I did, and because they understood how to do it correctly, and what it ended up being was a task of his mom, and kind of his dad had passed, and it was to kind of figure out how could he help his mom, or what could his mom do to get over the grief and some of the things that were happening. And so there was a lot of stuff that came out of that session as far as advice and things to do, but there was one really particular event that I kind of latched onto, and it was about going for a drive to go look at horses. She actually ended up, she loves horses, but it was a drive to go look at horses specifically. And apparently this is something she'd already done once or twice, but in the remote viewing session, I felt like, so there was a woman driving a car and there was an empty seat next to her, but there's something more there that felt very numinous. It was like, it stuck out a lot. It's like there's someone sitting next to her in the seat who's no longer there, who's no longer alive, but their presence, and it's almost like this is a terrible word because it can be used for anything. The energy of that person is still there with her. And that if she goes and do this, it could be something that she could do with this being, this energy, and they're going to sit in that seat alongside, go on the ride with her in the car, go look at the horses, and then come home. And I got feedback after that session work from the client saying that he didn't know about this, so he talked about this with his mom, and apparently this is something that she already had done once or twice, and she's told him, my client, her son, that she felt that her dad was in the car with her on those rides. And so one of the suggestions, I think, of what the data was proposing was do more of that. That's something that you will help you find some resolutions with this, and also handle some of the grief. Is go have this experience. He isn't in human form anymore, but there's something there that you can engage with on some level to help to move on in a way that you're able. So it was an interesting remote viewing lens into this because he was already passed, but I was picking up on that idea in the session work and in the prescription on how to move on.
Do you have any thoughts about how the act of going for a drive and looking at the horses might have allowed that energy to be present, or for her to be aware of it?
Possibly, very possibly. I mean, she'd already done it a few times before. I even described it in my remote viewing session as basically got to do more of this. But it wouldn't
But
surprise
it's
me.
like, is the energy there anyway, or is it just if she's looking at horses, she's in a frame of mind where she can be more aware of it, or are you
Hard
triggering
to
it, or is it just
know, but
opening up to it?
I felt like there was a consciousness that was still there with her that no longer had human form. What exactly that how that, the true nature of that consciousness, I'm uh, eh, not sure about, but there was
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
and it
yeah.
was non-physical, and it felt like someone that had passed. So those were the descriptors that I
Mhm.
got. So it again may just be using my lexicon, because that's a lot of what remote viewing is. It's using the words and the frame of references that I have to describe uh, something in the work. But it gave me just another perspective. It's like, oh, I've only seen one other remote viewing session that I've done that I can recall, where it was a downed airplane that went down in like the 1940s. And I had this non-physical awareness at the site, which felt to me like the dead pilot. It was really, really strange. And they were just hanging around the crashed aircraft doing nothing, just chilling. And I don't see dead people in my remote viewing sessions. So the fact that these things would come up is very like one-off type of a thing. It's not like if every single remote viewing session you do is about aliens, then the fact that an alien shows up in your session isn't surprising. It's not that kind of thing for me when this comes up. So
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had spontaneously
it was
noticed
super rare.
a dead thing in my. I mean, I've been tasked with dead people,
Mm-hmm.
and Josh was telling me the other day that he said, like, the sweetest moment I've ever heard from you
Oh yeah.
is when you remote viewed Zygmunt Adamski. What did I say? Like, oh, you're dead. I'm
So
sorry. Anyway, you
yeah,
So sorry.
no, you're honestly, it was a lot sweeter than that. We were doing this as a cowboy session, and he had dialed the individual up, and basically he starts talking, and in this really calm voice, he's like, "Oh, hey, I'm sorry that you died. I have a couple questions to ask you." And it's just like absolute tearjerker moment. I was like, "Oh." The,
David has a heart of gold.
I know.
he did.
News it down.
I don't know what happened with it afterwards, but for that one moment, I could see it.
I don't remember that bit, but I remember the afterwards, and it wasn't aliens. I described a guy getting jumped at the railway station by, like, basically they looked like mobsters. You know, two guys came up, walked towards him as if to meet him from ahead, while somebody snuck up from behind, and he just got battered,
Hmm.
and then left on the coal heap. I don't know about.
So
there's a lot of other details in that story. But that was my
I
days where it was done blind.
occasionally on just different social media feeds that I skim through from day to day, I follow a couple of hospice workers who talk about end of life care and things like that.
I
They
love those stories.
Some of them refer to this phenomena where basically once their patient has passed, apparently the standard procedure is to just keep talking to them, like explaining, "Hey, you've died," things like that, just like, and explaining what they're doing.
Interesting.
"I'm doing this now to prepare you so that we can move you to the funeral home." And supposedly there's this physical, and I forget the technical term they use, but basically through the process of explaining this to them, it seems like the something in their facial structure like starts to sink in, and it
Hmm.
appears to happen quicker when they talk and explain these things. So if you were to read into it from a more spiritual sense, it's like they moved on. And then
Interesting.
there's different, I believe this, I don't know if this is literal or I'm just repeating something off the internet, but allegedly when a person passes, they immediately lose about 7 pounds to their body mass.
I think it's
7
no, like
pounds. Sign me up.
isn't it
Seems a
something like
lot.
6 ounces or something?
I
That
thought it
might
was.
be
Is
it.
it 21
That's
grams?
it.
Is there a
21
movie
grams, I
called
think. Yeah.
21 grams? That's not about cocaine.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a pretty big guy. Maybe my spirit's equally heavy. We'll see.
The weight of a soul.
The-
Yeah, is it a percentage or is it the weight of the soul? I think some guy did experiments on that and, like, put people on a big
Hmm.
weighing scales when they
I
died.
vaguely remember seeing
I-
something on that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
sounds kind of implausible,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Doctor, I'm not feeling so well.
Hmm.
Get on the scales.
I've lost 200 grams. Oh no, I've lost my soul, but I'm still alive.
Oh,
Talking about
Double
the
came.
near-death thing, though, guys, in RV experiences, I think you guys may have seen it, but the best experience I ever had was when I did the JFK assassination for Courtney Brown and Farsight,
Right.
and I knew it was someone in session. I knew it was someone being assassinated, and I just spontaneously decided to follow that person to see what happened as they died. And we recorded a whole 20, I think it was like a 25-minute segment of me following the life through a transgression process and meeting other beings on a different kind of realm, I would say. And at the time, Courtney Brown wasn't interested in any of that because it literally was just about the assassination event itself. So it ended up on the cutting room floor, and then me and Dick made a YouTube video about it. With, lots of other stuff in there as well. I think it's called "The Moment JFK Died." So if anyone wants to look at that, that's free on YouTube. But that was my most amazing experience. Bearing in mind, I have been in spiritualist church pretty much my entire life, seeing mediums talk to alleged dead people. I think it was that the experience of experiencing that spontaneously on my own was the most affirming one for me, that there might be something to this life after death after all.
I had
Yeah.
how do you
a very
interpret?
similar
Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
experience where unfortunately a loved one of mine passed away, and I happened to have some time to be there with the body. And just at the time, because I'd started doing remote viewing and things like that, and I was overcome with a lot of grief, I wanted to try and follow down that path to sort of trace it. And I just, as I was holding the individual, I could kind of feel my consciousness shift over. I don't know if you've seen the Pixar movie Soul that came out around 2020, but there's a
It's actually pretty
sequence
good.
there where
It's worth watching.
the main character dies, and there's this large white orb, and the different souls that they're with start to kind of follow in and become absorbed in it. And I had that was the sort of mental image and experience I had during that process.
Well, it's a totally unrelated thing. Don't go into the white light. That's what Art Bell used to say.
That's what the
That's a
Scientologists
common
say.
thread now, isn't it? With the prison planet idea. Don't go into the light. It's a
What
trap.
is the white light? It's a trap. Yeah. That's
Or is it?
maybe that's a topic
this
for
is a
another
double
one.
bluff. Really, you should go
Death
into the
trap,
white light,
yeah.
because if you don't, that's when you get trapped.
Do you think
We'll
the
have to
white
do
light has
a more
cabbages?
in-depth talk about that one. You might. I think on that level,
there's a word for that, of how we escape the reincarnation trap, isn't there? I forget what it
I'll
is.
have to do some research and we'll talk about it in the future.
You should do a whole video on it, Brett.
Do a whole video on it. I know.
Yeah,
Maybe,
Oh, that'd
name
be
it something
great.
fancy
maybe a
like
second
Moksha
video on
or
it.
Yeah. Oh, Moksha, that's it.
I
Yeah.
won't do it.
Well,
I'm curious. I'm curious if anyone has had some, because I know I have, and has had any kind of strange experiences lately over the past several years. That, because we're talking a lot about life after death, and does something still consciousness, something exist afterwards, but it's such kind of a big umbrella term. I mean, just like, what is a haunting? And we may be haunted by something that never was alive. Maybe it always existed in that state. And I think that's mostly what I've bumped into, just in my own personal experience, even over the past 2 to 3 years. I don't think that these are necessary. Maybe they were a person at one point, but I got no impression that this was some lost soul that was confused and ended up in my space. Now, this is a very kind of malicious, typically malicious, or very inquisitive and concerned.
Oh, deceptive.
Deceptive is also
well.
something
Not
that's very
necessarily
common.
malicious, but manipulative.
Oh.
I made this observation kind of early on in my experience of dealing with these sorts of things, that if you look at the cluster B personality disorders like borderline and narcissism, all that bag of stuff, these things are really, really similar in the way they behave, in their kind of deranged, unbalanced, manipulative. They're very single-minded, and it's all driven by what, if it was in a human, you would call like an unhealthy coping mechanism or a psychological need or something, and they're completely focused on this, to the extent that there isn't anything else in those beings. And I think these things, whatever they are, that we encounter that behave in this way, can be created by people and their own trauma. Like if you get someone who's in a real bad place, constantly ruminating.
Sure, totally.
You could look at what a magician or whatever, some kind of yogi is doing. They are basically constantly ruminating, putting a huge amount of mental effort into creating some psychic construct, right? So I think people do it by accident, and then you end up with these weird psychic blobs of data that are like trauma imprints, which then float around and could kind of glom onto
I have a
you.
funny short story
And
about.
they appear to be human.
I have a funny, really short
go for
story
it.
about the one where it's like someone's trauma creates something, and I think that's usually it's commonly called a tulpa. Is one word for it. I mean, there's many other ones.
Isn't it? It's a tulpa if you do it on
that was
purpose.
Could be.
that
It
was
could
what
be.
came to mind.
Yeah, that would make sense.
There's a couple variations.
Yeah, like thought form, I think it's the better.
So it's just a funny short story. When I first started dating my fiance about a little over 4 years ago now, I immediately, when we started dating, got really, really sick, and a lot of really strange kind of body ailments I was getting like pimples, like I was 13 again, all over my face. I had like a weird rash on my neck. I got really sick randomly. I mean, the sickness isn't a big deal, but like all the weird body ailments out of nowhere was really strange. And so after a week of this, I was like, man, I wonder if there's something else going on in the psychic space that is causing this. So I put my attention around my room, and on the ceiling, I see this kind of goop. It's like a goopy thing that goes out, and it's like all over. And this is just in my third, like my psychic vision.
So sorry, you started dating this
Yep.
woman, and immediately there was goop all over your
So,
ceiling.
that's right.
Carry
This
on.
was black goop though. Is the way it looked like in my a little different than
Should probably see a
what
doctor
you were
about that.
thinking. Probably someone
Yeah.
should see a doctor. Not me, but well. But anyway, so I see this thing. This isn't physical, by the way. This is what I'm seeing in my psychic perception. And there's this, and I put my attention on it, and I go through. I'm like, well, whatever this is, I want to clear it out of my space. Didn't realize this was there. And one of the first things I do when I do a clearing session is I try and understand the function. What is your function? What are you? And then there's a whole process that kind of comes out of that. And I got super clear. It was almost like I heard the words being spoken directly into my ear. I heard that, what are you? What is your function? And the function was, I am Matt's revenge. I was like, who the fuck is that? and so I brought it up this very, gently. We were very early on in the dating. I asked Victoria, I was like, do you by chance happen to know a Matt? And it's like I had kind of blindsided her with something. And she was like, yeah. What about him? And I'm like, there wouldn't be a reason that he might want ill will against you, would there be? And he's like, maybe. So I'm not going to go into the whole story of what happened. The funny thing is we actually ran across him at the grocery store like 2 weeks later. So it was a weird synchronicity after I did the clearing of all that stuff. But there was a very good reason, suffice it to say, of he would prefer, like, it's his vengeance. The way I interpreted it was on anyone that she would date next would be carried out upon, and it end up in my space. It caused me to get sick and have all sorts of weird body ailments. And when I cleared it out of the space, all that stuff cleared up. So it was a very weird kind of. That would be an example of the thing that you're talking about.
Magician, or
no. I think
Yeah.
I have a feeling that when I tuned into it, this guy I didn't feel like he knew what he was doing, but he had such strong emotional angst that I think it was created. And when I did the dialoguing with this thought form, it felt like it was just extreme emotional anger and pain created whatever this was. And it kind of like tried to latch on to whatever, it would like seek out and latch on to whoever was dating her at the time. So
you
it
literally
was kind of strange.
You literally lived through a variation of the plot of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, then, huh? With the evil ex-boyfriend.
I don't know. The evil. I don't know if he was evil. I think he was just like he was very, very upset. He was emotionally distraught, and it created something.
But hurt the word here.
I mean, I never met him before, but yeah, I mean, he had a bad time. That's all. He was not happy with the outcome of things. So yeah, so it was kind of a strange thing. It was like I took her off guard. It's like, how do you know who Matt is? It was quite interesting. I mean, I think this was like the third week or something we were dating. It was really early on. It was kind of funny.
Did you explain to her, or did you just?
I actually did. So I very, without getting too weird early on, but she was a little bit into tarot, just like a little bit. Her dad was really into some of the more esoteric stuff out there. So the fact that I could have a conversation, at least lightly, about these topics didn't freak her out, which was nice. So yeah.
She was used to
Yeah,
it.
and now she's had full on poltergeist type activity living with me, for the past 2-3 years. So yeah. Doesn't phase her anymore though. That's kind of funny.
Josh, did you want to tell that story about the sexy ghost, or are we going to save that for another show?
That's the After Hours episode. No.
You got to pay for that
I
one. That's
suppose
premium
that's
content.
probably one of
Yeah,
the
we're not
most
telling people where you can get that. Yeah.
the psychic guys OnlyFans. No, there was I from time to time I dabble in shamanic journeying, and I was with a group of friends over the internet, to be honest. Like, we were experimenting with trying to journey to a singular location where we were playing a recording of essentially a guided meditation with drumming to this place called the House of Time.
Gotta watch out for the
And
drums. Look at you.
those are actually they help you get your brain waves in the right flow state or whatever, if that's your persuasion.
Sure.
So, to skip over the House of Time aspect and just go to the core of the story, we get to this location. We kind of have these sensations of interacting with each other. We're not we waited to talk to each other after the fact to like compare notes and see if it was just, well, we knew and then we just made an imaginary version of ourselves. But at one particular point in this journey, I'm in the lobby and going into an elevator. And when I go into the elevator, there's this woman who I start having this experience of her being extremely aggressive in a dirty sense, and it was really shocking. I did not like it at all. I pushed her off. I was like, "Excuse me, I'm married, psychic phenomena person. I don't want anything to do with this." I open up the
No
elevator door. I
astral
get the hell
cheating
out of
for
there.
you.
Yeah, that's just the last thing I need to hear. Is like, you did what in your imagination with a no. Um, I didn't. It came on to me. Let me get that straight. Anyways, after that experience, we wrapped up with it, and I'm comparing notes with my friends. And one of my friends, she starts talking about how she ran into a friend of hers who is no longer alive, who she originally got into those kind of shamanic journeying experiences with, and how she's agreed to become like a spirit guide or something. And as I'm telling the elevator story with them, and I share the description of this woman, she's like, "Wait a minute." And she sends me this picture of her friend and is like, "She didn't look like that, did she?" And I shit you not, dead on, that was the face of the woman who was attacking me in the elevator. So
So you
that's
actually saw a picture from her of the being that was
yes,
in
she
your
sent.
experience, your journey.
Yeah, I can't say
Huh.
here or there if it was the ghost of that friend or if it just shared that face, but that's probably the closest in psychic space that closest encounter I've had with a ghost.
It's pretty interesting.
It is, because it would be really surprising for you to see that face when you've never seen it before and it's nothing to do with you. If it was a trickster entity or some
Yeah,
garden variety manipulative thing, right? That's too indirect.
yeah, I
It's not
should.
their
Yeah, it
MO.
was wild. I had never met that particular individual, and these friends who I was doing this experiment with are their internet friends who I'd up to that point never seen their faces either, or known them outside of this internet context.
Interesting.
That's actually a really good one. That's quite unusual and unique, isn't it, to have that indirectly seeing somebody else's face by accident? I guess maybe not for you, Daz. If you were doing the mediumship, you were probably doing it all the time.
Daz, I got to hear your wildest poltergeist haunted experience that you've had. I bet
Did
you've
you
got a
have
good
any
one.
sexy
Any
ones?
sexy
Nothing
Yeah.
sexy, no. No. I did do it. I was a participant in an exorcism once. I was asked to join an exorcism. There was two older ladies here in the local area that were having weird things happening in their home. I was asked to join with my mother and another woman who was actually taught me to do psychic stuff, called Brenda. I was asked to go along as a backup, almost like like a psychic battery type thing. So I was just there to provide energy rather than do anything immensely interesting. But yeah, nothing much really happened. I have to report. I was just there linking up, providing energy. I didn't see anything. Kind of felt like there was something a bit weird going on at the time. Um, the lady seemed to have reported back to us that nothing else happened after the night's events. But yeah, I did find the whole experience a little bit strange. Because it's all based around a lot of rituals, including personal rituals where you have to protect yourself. So you have to I was taught that you had to paint with your finger using holy water a circle around all your orifices and stuff, to not allow anything to kind of like enter your body. So, that's, you can imagine that's a weird situation.
So is that why you didn't have any sexy
Yeah,
experiences then?
yeah, I think that put me off. You can imagine that's kind of
Josh
weird.
forgot to do that.
To be in the bathroom, a couple of old ladies, fingering yourself with holy water.
That's a brand new sentence there. That's never been spoken
Oh
before.
man, that's funny.
Hey,
So
the
was
Wow.
truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
what were you exercising in that particular? Was it specifically the context of we're getting rid of a ghost, or was it like they claimed it was
I
demons,
have
or?
to be honest, guys. This is going back like 30 years. My memory on it's a little bit hazy. It was something that was on the landing of the stairs that was giving them a really ominous feeling. A code spot, a dark kind of like energy that they didn't like, kind of thing.
God, it's always stairways and
It
doorways and
is.
stuff. It's always
And
these
cupboards.
transitional parts
Yeah.
in houses. Cupboards,
I
yeah.
actually
Liminal spaces.
one of the stories that
Yeah.
I have that happened recently, it happened this past year actually, has to do with a glass cupboard. We woke up and it had been shattered in the middle of the night. And the strange part is I actually have a security camera pointed directly at where that cupboard is, because there's the front door in the living room, and this is a glass door that is on the TV stand that we put some books behind and pictures behind it. And there was no motion, and that thing is very sensitive. Anytime one of our cats, we thought maybe a cat somehow jumped into the glass, I don't know, but
The
there was
cats have worked out how to defeat the motion
they've
sensors. They're
defeated the
wearing like
motion sensor. But
invisibility cloaks.
I actually have a little bit of a short story I could tell around that, which is pretty interesting because it was a shared experience between both Tori and myself. And for the preceding 4 days, we didn't really pay attention to it, but it was increasingly, the space itself started to kind of feeling heavier over the previous 4 days before that event happened. And Tori woke up and saw it, and on her account of when she saw it, she felt something was really angry. It was her very first intuitive thought when she saw the glass broken and all over the floor. The funny thing is, behind that little cupboard, that glass, it's like a wood frame with glass in the middle, are a whole bunch of spiritual books. All the other doors just have pictures and there's nothing really of that much significance, but there's a bunch of spirituality books about Christ consciousness, meditation, a bunch of other things. That just happened to be the one that was shattered in the morning. We did some just obviously she felt a certain kind of way. I felt a certain kind of way about it. And I tuned into it like, well, what was the cause? Just as a spontaneous, close my eyes, put my attention around the apartment, and immediately got the sense of a mass over near the front door. And it was really funny when I saw it the first time. It was kind of like peeking its head around a corner. And I saw, are you familiar with that painting, The Screaming Man, who kind of puts his hands on
Yeah.
his face, and he's like, "Ooh."
It's just called The
The
Scream.
Scream, yeah.
Oh,
So
and that, yeah.
it had bright white eyes that were like big circles with black dots on them, and like an open mouth, like a fish, like ooh. And it was just a black silhouette with kind of wavy hair behind it that looked like it wasn't really, like it was in like an astronaut's hair with no gravity, kind of waving behind it. And as soon as I saw it, it saw me see it and immediately ducked. And this is all, again, this is in just my psychic perception that I'm seeing this in the space. And I immediately got this knowing I shouldn't be the one to clear this. I should actually have, this is actually an interesting, for whatever reason, I just had this gut feeling Tori should be the one who should clear this because it would be good for her to handle it. So I called her over and I said, okay, close your eyes. Do you sense anything in the apartment? And she did, in a general same area. She didn't get quite, she felt more of a black mass was in that space of the apartment. And I said, okay, I'm going to let you engage with this. You know, and not like I've showed her some things on how to handle stuff in the space. Take this one on when you're ready. If you need my help, I'll come. And so she did. And I did a little bit more of research. Well, what is this? Just through my own psychic, just perception, investigation of it. And what I came to the conclusion of is that 4 days ago, this is when our space started feeling heavier over time. It was on the weekend, we went to a huge pawn shop. And this was like a massive warehouse pawn shop. So there's hundreds of thousands of items everywhere from all sorts of places. And one of the items that was probably the most unique that we came across, there were several, was a bunch of masks that were hanging on the wall that looked like tribal masks that looked very ceremonial in nature, something you might find that in Africa, perhaps from an African tribe. I don't know if they were, but they looked like they were very tribal in nature. And Tori, because we both noticed them, Tori made the comment, wouldn't that be really funny if those were hanging on your wall in your office? And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna pass on that one. But what I was perceiving in that, I was looking for what was the reason that caused whatever this thing to come, it was linking me back to that experience. And then I guess got the impression that that was actually an invitation to whatever there was something associated with that. And that was an invitation through sarcasm. It didn't really understand the sarcasm to, oh, look, these are two people that seem to be somewhat psychically inclined. Maybe that would be interesting to interact and engage with them. And so it tagged along home with us. And then since we didn't engage it for the next 4 days, because we didn't even realize it was there, we weren't putting our attention on it, it got further and further more frustrated. And it kind of came to a climax to where it saw these books that were totally out of alignment with what it was, of just Christ consciousness, this type of meditation, more Western spirituality, that it actually got really mad and angry, and it caused, maybe there was something like the glass itself already was in a precarious state, but it was enough to actually affect the glass itself and shatter it. And so that's what I picked up in my own work when I tuned into it. This was when Tori was going and doing her own thing. And she came back and she said she had cleared it, and the space immediately felt lighter. And I had, well, tell me, I don't want to front load you with what I got. What did you get? And she got the exact same story. She got that the masks in the pawn shop, something trailed us home. It was kind of mad at her, you owe me an apology. It's how she described it. You invited me here and then ignored me. It's like friends over for dinner and you just ignored them for the evening type of a thing. And so she was like, oh, so she basically, through the clearing of it, kind of apologized for the misunderstanding, and sent it on its way and the space felt immediately lighter. We both immediately felt it after she was done. So it's an example of an object being maybe what someone might traditionally call haunted, except it didn't need the object. It just liked the object for some reason. It's even how it presented itself in psychic space. It's what I saw. And she ended up, after spending time with it, seeing the same thing. So it's something following you home and haunting the space. And then that's what came out of that broken object, the broken glass on the cupboard. I guess that was the tie-in to what you were saying before. Is that it's interesting that like it's the cupboard that was haunted. It was like, well, I don't know. That's what was shattered for some reason.
Yeah.
So,
Cupboard.
Josh, didn't you get in trouble with your wife for haunting your own bathroom once?
Oh,
No, not specifically that. There was an individual on that remote viewing server we're part of on Discord who they were having this experience whenever they would do a remote viewing session, they would get data of eyes following them around.
Sure.
So, like any good amateur internet occultist, I decided to give a go at pulling it into my space, which at the time just happened to be the bathroom of my house. And I brought this, or at least a variation of this thought form, into that space and asked a couple questions about its purpose.
So wait.
And
So you summoned an eyeball into your wife's bathroom, and am I hearing you correctly on that one?
yeah, it does. Situation does escalate as well.
Okay.
As
okay.
So
oh, no.
I forget the particulars of the conversation, but basically we come to a gentleman's agreement of it. I'm going to put it in a quartz crystal and seal it in there for a period of about 3 to 4 days to see whether or not that individual on the server was still having that kind of eyeball interrupting the session experience when they were doing their remote viewing. And so I imprisoned this thing like Superman imprisoning Zod in the Phantom Zone style in a clear quartz crystal, and I put it in the bathroom closet, and then I have to politely inform my wife, hey, don't mess with that crystal in the closet. And she's like, why? I was like, well, there may or may not be an entity that's trapped in the. So we have a tentative rule in the house now that I'm not allowed to summon demons or anything in the bathroom anymore. But it. I also just for a little cover my own ass type thing. I took a picture of this crystal and asked David to try and like peer into it. I didn't specify that I'd put anything in there, I don't think. And he's like, wow, there's something trapped and locked in there. I'm like, oh good, it worked.
I don't remember this at all.
So sometime after that, I did end up releasing it with the clarification that I didn't want to see it anywhere near my house again. And a few weeks later, I was.
But it could go back and fuck with that original guy, no problem.
Yeah,
and
pretty
he can
much.
Pay you all over again.
No, he didn't pay. There was no payment. It was a favor to a friend. But my kid, my youngest son, like I'm at this point, he's somewhere between the age of 1 or 2, and we're walking around on the back porch at night, and he looks up and he points at the sky and goes, "I." And I look over and like I have this sense of that eyeball like staring and floating, and I did not politely clear it. I definitely visualized lighting it on fire a few times, but
that doesn't solve anything.
I sent
Josh.
it away.
Well, it does. I mean, it
it
does,
does,
I guess, but
does.
it does and doesn't. Yeah,
Well, at the time, I was much more wrapped up in both the after effects of like my former Christian, anything that isn't of God is demons kind of view, and then I was also relying a lot more on my old Marine Corps instincts of maximum aggression.
Shoot first, destroy the evidence.
Yeah.
In my own practices,
set it on fire.
I find that while again, this is just take this with a grain of salt. This is just my experience and my own clearing practices, and what I've learned from that works is that if I ever try to go to war with something, it's not that you can't win and you can't obliterate something into a bunch of bits, but in doing that, you kind of, what you do is you create an event of connection with those bits. That it's like you've now created like a rope to this thing that's in a decayed form that's tied to it. And so, yes, it may no longer be triggering you, but it may in a different way. And so I take a little bit of a different tactic when I'm clearing, where as opposed to trying to fight with it, what I actually try to do is help it overcome the reason it's doing the thing that it's doing. And so, like, why did you become this entity, whatever it is, that decides to harass people or cause pain or suffering or scare or all these kind of things? And see if I can help that entity or being, whatever it is, actually resolve quickly, if possible, resolve its trauma, and then move on from that need to present itself in that way, to go find something that's more interesting for it, more helpful, or for it, as opposed to tormenting other people. And I find that the willing release of an entity in the space is much more effective than the obliteration of an entity in a space. I think both do work for the outcome of its stomps, but I find one is more conclusive because it's like their decision to leave as opposed to them being forced to leave, because now they have this event.
What I was saying
that's a
earlier
trauma for
about
them.
my kid having the nightmares after I've not got rid of things properly,
Yeah.
that was exactly this, where I've basically yeeted it out of the room and not gone through that process of dealing with it properly. I just zapped
Yeah.
it, and it's left me alone. But then it's still out there up to its own
But you don't
tricks.
like my approach, fingering yourself with
What's
holy water?
I've never tried it, but I will now.
I honestly think that that's probably a best of
I
both
think I even
worlds
have some
kind of
holy
thing.
water.
We can find a way to incorporate all three of these variations.
There's your,
There we go. There's my
your
holy water.
He's got it. He's
Yep.
got it on camera.
Ready?
Oh no.
No, save it for the after hours, David.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll say
That's the OnlyFans version.
The OnlyFans. I do agree with you though. I mean, I don't know how much you view it now, because you said that experience was a long time ago. But I do think that there are things you can do physically in the space that will affect that realm. I've had tremendous success with using black tourmaline crystals, and I would poo-poo that idea tremendously beforehand. But other stories I won't go into right now. I had other really intense hauntings. I was fucking with my dreams. I was fucking with Tori's dreams. It was doing a lot of she would feel a hand go on her shoulder, turn around thinking it's me, and no one would be there. It was really kind of like unnerving, disturbing shit that was going on. And also it was affecting our dreams in just horrible, horrible ways. And I did clearing, but we also added in the black tourmaline, and I did other things too. But I think that there are talismans that do and can work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so just the intention that you put into it, like the holy water on the body, I think is probably the intention. And I don't see why it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. With crystals, I think maybe it's a little bit more than intention.
Probably.
Even if it's only just collective intention, like
An
there's just
energy.
a collective belief this one does that thing, because I don't see why the hell one crystal should do one thing and one crystal should do another, apart from the fact that millions of people believe that it does.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you, I was a massive skeptic of crystals. I was like, what does this crystal do? It costs money. What does that one do? That also costs money. This one's shiny. That's it. And then out of sheer desperation, I tried it one day and it worked super well.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow. And I don't have any like big theories about it. We did do that thing where we talked to Thoth and asked him about crystals.
True.
And
famous Thoth cowboy session.
Real talk. We should do a an episode on Thoth and crystals and just that end of stuff. Atlantis, Thoth's Atlantean crystals.
I think it would be really awesome. I've floated this idea with Tori, because Tori's really into crystals. and she actually, if she holds a crystal, she actually has a physical, she can feel it. If I hold a crystal, I don't feel jack all. Like, I don't have that type of sensitivity to it.
I've
But she
had that
does. She'll
kind of
feel it like
feeling
in her
as well.
temple and in different parts of her body, and so she can sense it. And we've actually floated the idea of just creating a small kind of hobbyist side business of taking crystals and working with them with our intention to program them, because we've had such good uses with it, like good responses. Well, what if we sat down with some and put our intention into, this is a protective thing, this is a healing thing that people
If you're
maybe could
gonna
use in
do
their
that,
space.
Yeah.
if you're gonna do that, you mustn't tell people how easy it is to do that.
Why not?
Otherwise,
I
you'd
think
be
it's fine that they do
cutting
it.
out your.
It's just
Well,
sometimes
no,
people
but
don't want to
yeah,
learn,
yeah.
and
I
that's
mean,
fine. No, it is very easy to do it, but I think
Josh, what do you get with the feeling the crystals?
It just a sort of subtle sensation of like, it's hard to say. Like, it's not a full-on hairs standing on end kind of feeling, but it almost feels like a secondary amount of weight when I have a crystal in hand, particularly if I'm working with it in a ritual context or something of that nature.
Interesting. If she feels it between
I
her
don't
in her
feel
temple, like, is it like a tingle in her temple, or like a tingle in the center of her chest, is where she feels it. And so it's like a pressure. It's
cool.
like a pressure
I
signal.
really want to find a crystal now and try this out, but I've never
Yeah.
noticed this before. I
Maybe
don't
it's
think
there
I've
and you
got it,
just weren't
whatever it
paying
is.
attention to it. He's grabbing the crystal. Have you worked with
Well-
crystals much, Daz?
In the past, more than I did now.
Sure.
When I did a lot more classical
Oh,
stuff.
look at this! I've got a little baggie of crystals.
And
didn't
for
even know what
many
these are.
years
These
I
are
wore
blue
a
ones.
I would call it a protective but also aspirational medicine bag as well. And that was
Yeah.
just like a little leather pouch with, different crystals with different meaning in it. And I wore one of those for about 15 years.
Got it.
Yeah.
What is your take on the objects and objects carrying with them something a little bit more than is material, like a
Yeah, absolutely.
haunting or just energetic type thing?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think it definitely happens. And it's becoming, although I can't prove it, it's becoming more so for me to see that kind of stuff in doing crypto targets as well.
Sure.
Like I am, as part of my looking at cryptocurrencies, I'm actually moving into the consciousness of the crypto, or thinking I am, and getting really positive, really accurate data from just having conversations with a consciousness that shouldn't really be there on a non-physical object. I can't prove that's
Well,
what's
it
happening.
isn't necessarily there, though.
No.
Like, a thing that I do when I'm doing cowboy remote viewing is if something's really complicated and I can't really understand it, or it's going to take me ages, I just say to it, look, could you just become an imaginary person and have a conversation with
It's
me and
possible.
explain yourself
It's
to
possible.
me? So
But I think that
if you want it to be,
if you have millions of people kind of thinking about a thing, I think it creates something about that. I think, like Batman, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's tens of billions of people that love Batman and think he exists. And I think that will create something.
Don't get me
we
started
did a
on
cowboy
psychically
session
talking
on
to Batman, Daz.
Yeah, well,
how many
that
beans
is
were
a
there, Josh?
talk
another
for another
podcast.
episode.
Yeah,
I've got to say.
Yeah, we still got beans trauma from that one.
Yes,
That was
the beans.
very weird. The
Perhaps
beans.
I see a really productive conversation forming about the nature of thought forms and crystals and energy. And I'm looking at the time, I'm wondering perhaps maybe this is something we should dedicate another episode to.
Yeah, I think so.
And
Psychic stuff.
we can all bring a crystal along.
Because I think
I've got
I've got loads. I've got all these blue ones. Well, actually, we could invite Michael along because he's got that massive one that's huge like that. He does. He's got a huge, long, fat crystal.
Oh yeah.
I got a little one. Do you guys wear any
He could
talismans
show
and
us.
stuff? Like I got this one.
Yeah, I not usually, but I do. I've got a black tourmaline. No, I've got an obsidian arrowhead.
I'm gonna
that I
get
wear
something.
if I'm going to
I'll
go
show you.
somewhere that Awesome.
Mine,
That I wear if I'm going to go somewhere with loads of bad
mine was
vibes.
South
Like when
African
I came to meet
meteorite.
you lot in London, that's really cool. I haven't got anything cool like that. I got mine off Etsy for £5, but they're very
Yeah.
nice though. Very reasonably priced from I think it's like the Reiki shop or
Yeah.
something. Definitely recommend their obsidian arrowheads. Very nice for absorbing bad vibes. But when I was coming to London to meet all you remote viewers, I wore it then
Mm.
because you guys got such bad energy.
So
No, I wore it obviously just because like cities, lots of people.
Yeah.
You want to
Yeah, it's
stay a
crazy.
little bit clean.
I'll be back there tomorrow.
And I'm a country bumpkin. I'm not used to it. I'm not acclimatized to an urban environment, so it's quite
I'm
overwhelming
going
to
to
me being around
as you guys
shitloads
know,
of
I'm going to
people.
London tomorrow for the pro-Palestine march with an expected 500,000 people.
it's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a
Bring
big
your
crowd.
protective talisman. So I have
I do.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you can
Yeah,
see. Let's see. This is a. So I'll wear this if I feel like I need it. I keep it next to my bed, and this is a specific kind of glass that's infused with quartz, and it has a gold uh, pin around the top, which connects to the band. I got one for myself and from Tori for Tori as well. And it's actually this was from the idea earlier is that there's a German actually makes this who does a lot of spiritual work and crystal work as well as clearing work. And what he infuses into, I mean, the crystal is kind of like a hard drive, is one analogy you might be able to use, where it can store intent. And he works with it before. I don't think he actually even makes these anymore, but he works with the Archangel Michael energetic form, and he infuses. So he spent time meditating with this, infusing the idea of Archangel Michael and the energy associated with that thing, which is a real energetic phenomenon that I've had experiences with, and kind of programs that into this. And anytime I'm wearing this, or even in Tori's experience, she's wearing hers, it completely it stops whatever is going on like almost immediately. So I've had very good success with that kind of thing. So this would be my more protective talisman. If I don't think it, I could still call on it without this. I don't, it's not mandatory. The nice thing about these types of items for me is I can stop thinking about it. It's something that's just running in the background where I don't have to deal with it. And if something does need to be dealt with, I'll like, well, something, a little alarm will go off saying, hey, you got something in your space, maybe do it. Maybe like some shattered glass. But that's my protective talisman. The other thing I do, because I do like these things, is I use I put intention into other objects like a ring. Here's my, I really like Nordic symbolism and the runes that you find that like Vikings use and stuff like that. And so I just found one that I liked that had some personal meaning to me. And then I put my intention into the physical object. And this is my, just what I refer to as like my psychic ring, something that I put intentions like when it's on my hand. The purpose of it is to amplify and help increase psychical functioning. And so what it may be pure placebo. I'm totally open to that idea, but placebo works. So
yeah.
that's how
And
I
more
view it.
expensive placebos work better.
Sure.
But Josh, tell us about your runes because they were the cheap kind.
Oh, which ones do you mean? My the
The
ones
one
I
where you did
draw,
that
or
series, yeah, the ones you drew on yourself in Biro and had wild shit happening. So
oh,
you don't
it was
need
lovely.
fancy gimmicks.
I was experimenting with a tradition of magic referred to as Seder, and uh, essentially it it was called Seder, and then sometimes it's called Runemal. But basically, it involves taking the different letters of the Elder Futhark runes and just using them magically, similar to how people might use their normal alphabet of choice for creating sigils and things like that. What David is referring to was it was an exercise where I was going through all 24 and I would write one on my hand with a pen and then just notice different aspects of my day and what things changed. And I had some pretty nice experiences, like putting a rune for wealth and getting a free lunch at work and things like that. But yeah, actually, I would love to see the runes you had at some point, and maybe I can tell you what kind of traditional correspondences they might have. For a while, I actually also had a rune keyboard on my phone for when we would do cowboy sessions, and I would throw them up before we would do a session as a form of psychic protection by imprinting it on
It
the
was very
Discord
up to
server.
I think a lot of it's intent, but I this is my belief.
I agree.
And then the intent can be, you don't need a physical object, but it's fun.
Of
Why
course.
not? And it's something that
It's fun. It works.
it does work. So I think you can do these same kind of things in non-physical space too, just energetically. I mean, there are thought forms that can exist in that space. I think you could do the exact same thing with the thought form too. But we're physical beings, so why not use a physical object to help us navigate this space to some extent? And that's
I think
what
as
I've
long as
chosen.
you don't become dependent on it as like a
Totally.
crutch.
And
Because
that's
what can happen is like people
very good
can
point.
get the necklace to protect them. They
Very
feel
good
better,
point.
and then one day they lose the necklace, and it's like,
Yep.
oh no, I am a victim. I am
Yep.
vulnerable. Oh, the special magic thing is gone.
Yep.
And like when I was trying out the arrowheads, I bought 3 because I read something that was like, be really careful not to get attached to them. Throw them out when you don't need them. Like you are literally going to throw it in the trash when you're done.
Well, I'm a bit more.
Which is why I didn't buy anything
I'm
expensive.
a bit more
Yeah, sure.
sentimental than
But
throwing things
the idea
away.
was to prevent
But you're
attachment,
right.
right? Was to not
Totally.
become dependent on it.
Yeah, I could go buy another ring and you do the exact same thing. It's not this specific ring that, oh, this holds it like it's Lord of the Rings and Saruman's ring, and whoever has it gets my precious. It's not what the purpose or the intent of what it is. This is more of a reminder. That's all it is. I'm the one who is creating is the energy for that purpose. This is just more of a reminder. And I think that's really what talismans really are. At least that's how I use them. So yeah, it doesn't matter which one it is.
Cool. Well, should we do Tulpa's thought forms, energy, talismans, and stuff next week then?
Maybe.
That's
definitely add it to the list. Yeah,
add it to the list. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of close.
Maybe.
It's kind of close to the things we talked about tonight. So maybe spice change it up a bit.
Give it a break. Yeah,
but
yeah, definitely add it to the list. Along with other tools as well. I've got several sets of tarot cards. I don't use them that often, but I've got several sets of tarot cards I could, bring in show and stuff. And I'm sure you guys have tools as well that we could.
We all do, yeah.
A show and tell episode would be really funny, actually. Let's show all the tools that we use. That would actually be kind of cool. You show our tech, because I got, things like
I do have a crystal ball as well.
Oh, I gotta see that.
Have you? I've got a tiny crystal ball.
Yeah, I got a crystal ball somewhere.
Yeah, but we've done a lot of damage with that crystal ball.
Oh, we have.
That's a story for another episode. Maybe for our OnlyFans.
I could show you
another episode.
This is going to sound a bit weird, but I could show you my mother's ring that she made.
Has that got holy water on it as well?
No, but it's a scrying ring that she made with ribbons on it.
Oh, interesting.
What? I've never heard of it.
I've never heard of that. Huh.
Yeah, so I could
Does she look through the ring, or is that that's another?
I've got to see that. I'm excited.
Yes,
this is a great one.
I can talk all about scrying and
show and tell.
Let's wrap this up.
All of us come to class. The teacher will call us up to the front, in front of the chalkboard, and we'll show all of our little psychic toys.
What weird props do you use? So here is a magical item. I don't know if you guys can see this.
Yep. Very strange.
This guy.
I see a little duck.
And the function of this is to close out our podcast for this week. That's its magical
Very
power.
magical.
So thank you guys for sharing all your wild and wonderful experiences.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you to anybody who's listening to this on week 2. And we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Okay.